Yeah, hello everyone and welcome. I'm Lauren Hubele and I'm here with homeopath Luke Norland. Luke, thanks so much for joining me again on this journey.
The pleasure. Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yeah, well, great. Luke, you know what's really fun for me about this is one, this is new information for you, right? And so
Sure.
there's nothing I enjoy more than sharing this with someone where it's brand new because your questions open up more pathways for me and understanding and how I might explain things. So I really want to invite you to kind of
Okay.
push up against me today,
All
okay?
right.
And
Yeah,
I don't
that's
think
good.
you mind taking on that role, do you?
No, I don't mind doing that. No.
Great, great.
No.
So, Luke, today what I'm going to just start is just on a high level um, introduction to the nervous system and the Gemmos we've isolated that we know, if used in microdose, can
Yeah.
be helpful. And
Okay.
I've been working with the extracts, and there are about 58 extracts in our Materia Medica. We have isolated 26 that we know have effects on either the autonomic or the central nervous system. And it is my studies of polyvagal theory and my understanding of how the body takes in information through the central nervous system that's really informed my choice in suggesting we start working with the nervous system with the central nervous system first. And the way I see it is the central nervous system is, and it's not just how I see it, it's how it's designed, is to take in all the sensory information. And we begin doing that from the minute we wake up in the morning and distribute it. And so, how we take in that information is really critical to how it might be distributed. Does that make sense to you?
How we take it in is critical to how it might be distributed. Yeah, because the quality of the information is, that leads to you can't distribute anything if the quality isn't there, I guess.
Exactly. Like if you're listening to something and if our call were to cut up and you couldn't hear me or
Yeah.
I was garbled, you would only get a certain quality of information. So
Yeah.
what Dr. Stephen Porges discovered in his research and work with the vagus nerve is that we have a, a system that works like a neuroception within our central nervous system. And it's a little bit like a radar that is going around as we enter a room or we walk outdoors. And that radar is constantly informing our central nervous system whether we're safe or in danger. Because at the end of the day, our nervous system is designed on a very biological level to save our life.
Yeah.
And at a very fundamental level, um, do I flee this situation? Do I fight or am I safe? Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So when we're thinking about this neuroception and this am I safe or am I in danger, we also have a lifetime that's informed our system and of what's dangerous and what's safe,
Mm-hmm.
right? So for instance, you may have a few things that really set off your nervous system that aren't particularly dangerous and they won't cause you to be your life to be at threat, but they might still trigger something in you. Do you have any sense of maybe something sensory? Maybe it's a particular sound or
Mm-hmm.
feeling that you have a kind of what we would call like a knee jerk or a protective response against.
Mm-hmm. Might be something like someone walking behind you would be one thing.
Oh,
They're
yeah,
like someone walking very close behind me.
yeah,
Um, in fact, yeah, probably people coming, you know, too close would be one, I reckon. Being
yeah,
in a being in a crowd. Uh,
sure,
yeah.
sure. And your system, for some reason, has decided over your lifetime that there might be reasons to alert you for that.
Yeah.
Um, and they may be logical or not, but they just are.
Mm.
And so, for instance, your wife could walk up behind you, and hopefully that would not be a threatening situation, but it might um, cause you to react in a protective way.
Yeah. 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 Or in a, yeah, sort of circumspection might come first and then protective. Like,
Yeah,
yeah, which is protective actually, isn't it? Yeah, of course it is. Yeah.
yeah. So, when we're looking at how the nervous system works in a very simplistic way, we can look at information coming in. Does it cause me to um, want to protect myself, or does it cause me wanting to connect? So, for
Mm.
instance, I know you have a love for music, um, and there might be a type of music that draws you in, right? That you want to connect to. Is there a type of music that makes you want to protect yourself from it?
Yeah, probably like cheesy pop or like loud adverts on the TV. Hate it.
Yeah, yeah,
Soon, yeah, have to mute that. Um, but yeah, in general, like saccharine, sweet, like auto-tuned pop that follows, yeah, that's really derivative. Those would be the
sure,
yeah,
sure.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Whereas if you heard some beautiful chamber music or something
yeah.
jazzy, you might feel very different.
Yeah, jazz, symphonic, chamber, I would get drawn in, definitely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So we all have these different experiences, and one of the first steps in working with someone is just helping them tune into that.
Mm.
If someone's in a very highly protective state, that takes a little bit more time versus I hope you're feeling very safe and connected here. You've been able to tap in quite easily. So I want to just kind of give that introduction to um, this idea that how we meet, what comes in, really has quite a deep effect on our response. And we'll see that down the road as we look into the autonomic nervous system. But let's just take a look real quick. I have this little lovely little graphic here that we kind of look at as the course of how our system moves through sensory reaction. And for instance, if you encountered your techno pop somewhere and you had to go into a state of protection, I'm using the word crisis. That isn't really a crisis if you can click the mute button real quick, but your system is experiencing that
Mm.
as that.
Mm.
And when you are in a state where it's not an overload and overwhelm state for you, you can
Yeah.
get some clarity and go, oh, hey, I know what I can do. I can just turn this off and then
Yeah.
I'm good. And then you're fine and you can move on. But sometimes when we're moving through things, we have to move through all these states. And so let's take something a little more significant than something just sensory. We might have some really challenging news we've received. Um, and we've heard someone we love is very ill, and we've taken this in, and our nervous system goes into a state of crisis of how am I going to cope with this, and how do I respond. And so the first thing our nervous system wants to do is start looking for context, and we do that through, and we gain some clarity in that, like, okay, maybe it's not as bad as I thought, it's this and this and this, and this helps give us information to make some, gain some next steps. But what happens so often, and we're just going to stay in this part of the wheel today, is sometimes we have so much incoming information, and we were just discussing this before our recording, that we kind of stay in this state of crisis, um, because it's one bit of information for our system after another. Um, a good historical period of that of recent times was during the first lockdowns and of COVID, and it was a sensory overload of information, of folks not knowing how to process and kind of staying in this heightened state of alert, of crisis, and you couldn't really achieve any clarity
Mm.
for a number of reasons. Does that resonate, Luke?
Well, I don't watch the news, so
Good for you.
yeah, yeah. I just wrote down when something's trying to obviously influence you, like adverts, like really kind of derivative pop music. It wants to get a certain reaction out of you. That's when I'm like, no, switch it off.
Yeah.
So it's the same with the news. It wants to emote, bring up something, in a kind of, there's a deviousness to it that I reject, basically.
Yeah, this is a really healthy attitude. And the thing is recognizing that. Unfortunately, so many folks don't recognize when they're being manipulated by information and it's trying to cause a reaction in you, right? Yeah,
Yeah, and it can be addictive, can't it? The reaction, so the
of course.
drama that it brings, and the talk that you talk to each other about it, and that heightens it again. And the whole thing is, an addictive spiral that the neurotransmitters affect the hormones, and
That's right.
yeah, yeah,
Yep. And we just stay in this state, right? It's like a soup.
yeah.
Sure. Well, for those of you out there that are swimming in that soup or know folks that are, we're going to be talking about exactly what might be able to help you today. So I want to share just a few terms of vocabulary for our listeners, and I think these are probably familiar to you already because of our other talks, Luke. But
Mm,
in each extract that we look at, there's different actions it has that may be a tonifying action or a harmonizing action. So today we're going to be speaking just about harmonizing actions. These are actions that bring balance into a system. It's not trying to elicit a response, where a
mm,
tonic is trying to um, elicit a stronger response and push a bit for that. A harmonizer brings balance. The other thing that because we're going to be talking about a number of trees and plants, one thing I found really interesting as we start looking at these is how one grows. And one type of plant that has a great interest to me, particularly in its use in as a Gemmo form, are pioneers. And pioneers are the trees and shrubs that come in first into an area that's been degraded, whether by fire or flood or um,
mm,
uh, man-made even. And these first plants come with a real force. They're very rapid growers. They don't have um, deep root systems, and they're designed to reproduce and reproduce.
mm,
I find the actions of these really fascinating. And
mm.
when we're looking at the extracts homeopathically, is that a category that's kind of separated out, Luke?
N Not distinctly like you've done it there, which is great. But yes, things like fern, when in the proving of fern, there was, that came up and there was talk about that. but there isn't enough categorization of trees in general, actually, to sort of say, which ones are pioneers. And
Yeah.
yeah, looking at how, their life cycles, particularly,
Yeah.
nobody's done that systematic work. No.
Yeah. Well, it's something that really fascinates me. And we're going to start right off with a pioneer tree. Um, but first I want to share with you the state that that tree would be helpful with. So, Luke, this is how I'm going to do this. I'm going to share with you a particular state. We have six of them. We'll see how far we get today. Um, and let's just kind of feel into that state, so that folks can get a good picture of it. And it is the state that we're prescribing to. We're not looking at what are the 50 actions of that extract, but rather we're looking at what is the state that it can be of service of. So we're already touching on this topic, and I think this is a state many are feeling these days, and they're operating from this state of fear. So if you wake up in the morning and the central nervous system is receiving information when you're already operating in a state of fear,
Mm,
I could imagine that we might not be getting quality information,
mm, no.
right? So in this state of fear, we have a noted reduction in the space in which you're able to experience safety. So when we're in that heightened fear state, we tend to reduce the size of our world. We tend to reduce the number of people we might be in contact with,
Mm,
the organizations we participate in, the um, um, amount of time we're even out and about.
yeah.
Um, and our decision making, all the choices we make are based on fear. Do you have some thoughts on this state, Luke?
Mm. It's an interesting one because it makes me think of the colors in human design, and the first color, red, is about fear, and so it's a motivation, and there's a kind of transference to the quality of need in human design. So most colors transferred, so red transfers to green. So you the compensation, if you like, is I need this and I need that to, make me feel more safe. But the positive side of fear is that it is about building intelligence. It's like if I can understand this better, which kind of looks at your coping strategy of control. If I can research and understand this more, then um, that will ameliorate the fear, but it won't make it go away. Um,
Right. And control could also look at, controlling my environment. I mean, we know many folks that live in a very small
mm,
world, right? They
right, right,
have, and unfortunately, it happens a lot to folks as we age, right? Our world gets very small, uh,
sure.
because of fear of a number of things, whether it's real or imagined.
Yeah, so it's a limitation. I won't do that because there's a fear that's governing the action. Or, yeah, I suppose for me, like one fear is like someone will steal my possessions, right? So I control those situations by making sure I've, you know, done the locking. So locking the car, locking my office, that sort of thing. I have to like control that action so I know I've actually done it. Otherwise, I'll have to go back and check.
Hmm. Hmm. So that's kind of an underlying theme there.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think, yeah, I think for me, the fear would come about more in, again, in a crowd. If I go to a festival and there's a really big crowd,
Yeah.
that would bring the fear out. Yeah, certainly has done in the past.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah,
there's situational fear, right? But then
sure.
there's this operational fear where
You
it's,
just wake up and it's your baseline
yeah,
state. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So when we're looking at these extracts, we can use them intermittently when there's a situational fear. But if we're trying to resolve that on a chronic level,
Mm.
um, and again, I think we're in a really interesting period of time where this could be very helpful for many people because what we know in the operation of the nervous system, when we are in that hyper alert state, we lose access to our prefrontal cortex, which we can observe happening quite a bit out in the world, right? That folks aren't making decisions from this place. They're making it from a very reactive state.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So let's dive in a little bit further because I want to share with you the way I look at these extracts and what they can provide. So, in helping folks understand the state, I have a list of um, things that, and it's not exhaustive by any means, but this is
Mhm.
what we've discovered in all of our Gemmo labs that we've done over time in our feedback loop is that there's a state that is served very well by this extract. And this fear state is the decision process is either very limited or it could be frozen. We all know people that can't make a decision anymore because their fear is so elevated that life becomes very carefully constructed to prevent anything from occurring. And what happens when we're living in that place, we're not really engaging with life, right? We're controlling it, but we're not flowing and engaged and growing and changing. I also see that this in this state, there's also fearful dreams that are arising because your psyche, your soul is trying to heal that state for you that you can't heal yourself during the day. Um, and the other thing that I often see in this state is this heightened fear for others, your family members, your loved ones, this heightened fear of, oh my God, they can't go out in the car because XYZ might happen, or not go out after dark to this practice, or there's just this um, level of anxiousness about the safety of others.
Mhm.
Thoughts on that state?
Mm. Sorry, I you saying down then. With yeah, I think there was something there, but
That's
sorry.
okay. I'll keep going and you
Oh,
just
God.
share. So what we have observed with folks taking this extract on a daily basis, that these things can be resolved, and we're not seeing, it's not an on and off switch, but it's an
Mm,
improvement because you'll start, and this is how a practitioner or someone that's prescribing for someone else might be able to see, is this doing its work and is it time for something else? And we
mm,
might see that the decision making process now opens itself up like, yeah, but I really want to go to that concert. I love that singer, or I love that. And I'm going to do that for myself. And because I actually know I'm going to be safe regardless of these feelings I have. Or um, that your sense of safety begins to open up new options, very similar in thought. You begin to engage with life. Dreams are always telltale, as you know, in of our daytime life. So
yeah.
they begin to settle or resolve. Um, and it may even get to the point, a lot of folks have commented on being able to come into their dream and control the outcome in such lucid dreaming practices with the use of this extract. And
Mm.
they begin to see there are more outcomes than just the worst case scenario.
And do you ever see, because I'm thinking about it, with reference to myself, and I think that there's probably I relate more to the control, to the compensation than to the fear. I do have dreams where there's fear elements of like you're traveling and the train's gone the wrong way and you're trapped in the train, that kind of thing, or you're having to get out your passport from your luggage and you have to get all of your luggage out and you can never find it. Um, and I think that a lot of, yeah, so for me, the fear comes up if something's out of my control.
Yeah.
If there's like someone wants to do something that's a change to my like what I want to do, my routine, then then the fear probably comes up internally. And because yeah, probably because I'm not in control anymore. I'm saying, oh, that's their thing that they want to do. And I should be able to support them, and you have to sort of then go into a different mode. And yeah,
Yeah, while I'm
that's
listening to you, Luke, what comes up for me is that your experience of this isn't so acute. It,
no,
yeah,
no,
it's more on a chronic level. So there might be another extract and state that you identify with more.
sure,
And but what you've really pointed out is a good thing for me to comment on now is, you know, like, and you know this from teaching homeopathic remedies, you sit and listen and suddenly you see yourself in all of them, right?
sure.
That's because we are all everything, right? That it is true. But I think when we're looking at these, we're going to look at these six and say, what is more present for me right now? Right?
Hmm.
What is the most present for me?
Mm.
Um,
Yeah,
so based on what you're saying, maybe this, but maybe not. Maybe it's something else.
sure.
Yeah. So we've got a picture of right of the root system of this particular plant, and the plant we're talking about is the black poplar
Hmm.
uh, tree, and it is a pioneer tree. It has a saccharine root system. And that's why they grow in thickets. And they come in and populate an area and actually create almost a wall, can create almost a wall. So a
Hmm.
wall of protection, right?
Hmm.
Very much like what this extract does. Um, there's a lovely picture of the tree. They're really fast growing, and they mostly enjoy having their roots in moist soil. They have no tolerance for drought conditions, but they can tolerate some really interesting things. And so when you think of what this extract might give you, I'm in a place of fear and I have to control everything. Um,
Mm.
but the tree has learned to tolerate very strong winds, high strong winds.
Hmm.
So we can think about wind in an interesting way when we're thinking
Mm.
about things coming at us out of our control, right? Can
Hmm.
tolerate heavy clay. It doesn't necessarily appreciate root competition. So other trees coming up close, maybe behind them, Luke.
Hmm. Yep.
It does have this very expansive and yet shallow root system. So, the effects of this may take some time to get in. I think it is excellent for handling that very acute fear
Mm.
state. Um, I have questions whether it handles that deeper, more
Mm.
varied fear that we've collected over years, but it would take off the top layer for sure.
Uh-huh. That's interesting because aspen is from the same
Yeah, of course it
group
is.
of trees, isn't it? And it's
Yes.
a similar state in the bark flower therapy.
Well, this is we have in the Gemmo forest here in New Hampshire, we have quaking aspen that we're growing for this same purpose that black poplar
Mm.
is used for on the European continent, and we're actually having it tested this year. But the
Mm.
one of the things that's really interesting is that quaking and fear, right, that we associate, and Bach does
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting. It reminds me, I had a patient who did really well on this remedy, and he came in an acute, but it was really that was resolving. We took his chronic case, and his main problem was his head was always shaking.
Oh, wow.
And when I took the case, I sort of used Michal Yakir's method,
Yeah.
like consider his like inner age, which was very old. Essentially, it was all about taking on responsibility. And as a youngster, he had to live with his grandparents in a pub, and he felt that there were ghosts and things there. And so I feel like the Aspen state was implanted in him as a child and been there all his life, really. And the remedy worked really well for him. It actually, reduced his wobble, and yeah, he stayed on that remedy. Um, and it's not really used in homeopathy. It's more known in bark flower.
Well, you brought up something really interesting. We have seen this be useful in um, cases of tremors and Parkinson's. And
Mm,
what you mentioned is this, buried deep in the childhood. There's actually a acupuncturist here in the US that has done extensive research on Parkinson's and that it really stemming from a deep old trauma. Does this sound like familiar research to you?
no, but I can understand. I mean, most
Yeah,
things,
it's
don't they?
fascinating. And that when it often these tremors arise is when the structure of everyday life, for instance, a job, a career, and so it comes upon retirement, when that structure is removed,
Mm.
that this tends to arise and the body is trying to heal it through the tremors. So I'll look for the link and I'll put it in these show notes for folks, but you also might be really interested in looking at that.
Mm. And the other thing that caught my attention with, how it's is able to cope with strong winds. It made me think, obviously, of the wind trigram of the I Ching and how in human design that basically populates the splenic center, uh,
Yes,
which is Libra and Scorpio. And so, yeah, the being knocked off balance by the wind and having to respond, and the splenic center being all about safety and security. Am I safe? Am I secure? Those are the driving forces for the splenic
absolutely.
center. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it would be very helpful with that.
Yeah. Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
Well, look, let's take a look at one more. I do want to show you the materia medica, although when we're microdosing, all we're really looking at is what does it do for the nervous system. However, this extract has some incredible gifts that it brings on a physical level if we're taking a higher dose. So if we're taking 3 to 18 drops, we can tap into all these other actions. Today, I'm focused on just what's it doing for the nervous system? And we know it is a central nervous system harmonizer, but it has this neuroprotective capacity, which lends itself to the conversation we were just having about Parkinson's and
Mm.
neuro degenerative diseases. So it has some really interesting offerings for that.
Because it's part of the Salix family, isn't it? So
Yeah, it
does it
sure
have
is.
some of the same constituents as like aspirin?
Yes. So we do have to be
Makes-
careful of administering this to children, even in a microdose. I would not use this as a nervous system extract with children under 6 unless you are absolutely confident there's no allergy to aspirin.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Well,
Right.
Luke, I think we have time for one more. Should we dive into one more state? And
Yes, please.
okay, let's look at this. So this is a very interesting state that I think we can all also identify at some point is this is the state of fragility. This state is feeling like you are at your edge of falling apart. Um, and this shattered glass, I think, is a really interesting um, image because it's still held together, right? But it's weakened by the cracks. And that is what it feels like. this state is emotionally at the limit, but it also could be physically. And we all know that physical weakness we get when we are emotionally at our capacity. I don't know about you, but I feel it in my legs. Like sometimes it
Mm.
might feel like my legs aren't strong enough to support me. Do you have a particular place you feel that kind of weakness, Luke?
Get jelly legs. I think that I probably feel it more abdominally.
Uh,
Yeah, solar plexus, I reckon.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
And in this state, our coping strategy is to cling to someone.
yeah.
So this can become very habitual,
Uh,
and we have to be aware of that. Maybe it's clinging to a partner, maybe it's clinging to a practitioner. There are many folks that have their collection of practitioners that they feel like only because I'm seeing these people on a regular basis can I keep my stuff
mm,
together, right?
yeah.
And there's a dependency that borderlines being unhealthy here. Um, or we might cling to a particular frame, but there is a clinging, and
Mm,
that'll make more sense in, as we move through this state of fragility. So the extract that we're looking at that supports this is dog rose.
mm,
And dog rose, we'll get into how it grows in a minute, but let's look at the state. The state is this barely being able to keep it together, clinging to others for support and neediness. There's a codependency here. We have to be really careful when it becomes chronic. There's certainly a sense of codependency. The outlook on the world is from that of being a victim. And
mm,
we can hear that in the conversations very easily. Things are happening to them. It's not, I might take some responsibility for me. It's a download of all the things that have happened to them that they have been a victim of, not taken part in. Relationships can be messy with these folks. And there is a stuckness in this endless loop of chronically searching for solutions, but not making any progress.
that's like my dreams. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So this might be coming a little closer. Let's look about at how dog rose grows. I don't know about you, but this is one of my favorite plants as it shows up in the spring. Do you have much growing around you?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, they're lovely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's such a beautiful plant in the hedgerow, and I love that all of its companions, when growing naturally, are all Gemmo plants like
Mm,
blackthorn and blackberry, and so we've got a number of them. I think I
right.
chose this picture because you can see the fragility of the blossom, right? It's
Mm,
really beautiful until you touch it. And that is very telling of that state. Just don't touch me, don't give
mm,
me one more thing to carry, right? If you
right.
put any weight on any of those blossoms, they would absolutely collapse.
Yeah, this one
So,
resonate more. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
This is an extract you use in homeopathy as well. Am I right?
Rosa canina. Yeah, yep, we have it. And the Rosaceae family in general, it's become more understood and well used. Traditionally, it was things like Laurus cerasus, Prunus spinosa, and
Mhm.
um, yeah, and Hawthorn, Crataegus, isn't it, for the heart? Yes.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, in recent times, more rose family plants have been proven, and there's a good book by Massimo Mangialavori from Italy who talks about the themes of Rosaceae about being selflessness and overly giving. Um, and it's interesting the position of it is right at the start of subclass 5, which is all about um, where you meet the other essentially.
Oh,
So
right.
there can be conflicts or love. So love is a big part of the Rosaceae. But there, it's all about where you meet that interpoint with the other. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we see here in this extract, you're not meeting it necessarily on healthy terms, right? It's
yeah,
a little
absolutely.
overextended. So rapidly growing growth to the plant, anyone that has experienced trying to sort it out or clear it's a jumble,
Oh
right? Of
God, yeah,
pains. And what I find really interesting is it'll catch you, right? It'll hook you
yeah,
just very much like energetically that state will. And it's the one plant I think still in winter, if I walk through the forest, it'll still catch my foot or catch my leg.
mm,
And I'm always asking, hey, what is it I need to be paying attention to that I'm not, right? Probably 100 things. Like black poplar, it has a real tolerance for high winds and also coastal climate. And when we're looking at plants, that's probably one of the strongest type of plants, one that can handle the coastal climate because that's the
mm,
harshest.
yeah,
So thinking about how useful this is in a very challenging situation. It's it's a little bit in if I could compare it to Bach remedies, it's very much like rescue remedy. It's an excellent
mm,
go-to in that overwhelming crisis, like I'm at my
yeah,
point, but that state has a continuum. So all of these states do. And we're all on it. It's just where are we in at
yeah,
this moment in our life on that continuum? These aren't characteristics and they're not describing people, they're states we all have within
sure,
us. And it's just what's arising right now. The root system is really gnarled and branchy, and again, it's putting up suckers very quickly. So its growth patterns I find very similar to black poplar. And when I look at the two, and if I can differentiate with them for a moment, um, the the need to the compensation, I think, is where I would separate them. And if I had someone and I was looking at it, I would say, how are they compensating? Are they clinging to someone or are they, controlling their life and limiting it? Which is more prevalent?
right, right. Are they clinging or controlling? Yeah,
Yeah.
to differentiate the two. Yeah,
Yeah. I think other than that, they both are really helpful in that acute state and then certainly also resolving that long-term underlying um, sense too of the state. We see dog rose is a harmonizer for the central nervous system. An interesting side note is in high doses from 3 to 18 drops, it is a super effective tonic for the immune system. So again, I get this picture of this rescue
mm,
remedy kind of thing. And although we don't use rescue remedy, this is a rescue for the nervous system. And
yeah,
it's very helpful in higher doses at activating that first line of defense. Um,
mm,
and again, when I think of defense, I think of the thorns on the plants, right? That's the first line of defense. I don't
yeah,
know about you, but that's one thing I always look at when I'm looking at plants and whether they might have a link to our immune system is whether they have thorns or not.
right. Right. Yeah. And you start to see those more aggressive signatures at this point in the plant evolution, the Rosaceae family. They have this interesting duality between being a symbol of love, giving bountiful fruits, the blackberries, the strawberries, the apples, and everything. And then the other side, that the barb, the thing that catches you, the thing that attacks you, the thing that says, get out of my space. And they take up a lot of space as well, don't
Oh,
they?
yeah.
Like if you let a blackberry go, it's like, yeah, it
Yeah.
can grow so fast, can't it? And take over.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
Yeah,
lot to
yeah.
think about there. So Luke, with that's only two to get us started, but I
Yeah.
like the way that we dove into them. Is there something else that I could offer that might help make them more clear for you, or some thoughts you might have?
No, it was very clear. I enjoyed learning about those two, and it's interesting putting them into their respective places in the table that I have in my mind of, plant evolution. Because they're actually right next to each other in a weird way. So this the Selicalis family come at the end of subclass 4, representing old age and maturity. And, in general, if a plant order can produce trees, then there's a sort of stability and a grounding there, um, and an oldness. But then you go to the start of subclass 5, which is the Rosidae, and it starts with the Rosaceae family. So if you go from the bottom to the top of the next one, you've got the Salicalas, then the
Interesting.
Rosaceae. Yeah,
Yeah, I'll be really interested how this plays out as we move through, because I wasn't looking at that as I was grouping these. Um, we're looking at responses and what might be most helpful first in the process.
yeah,
But certainly the plant development plays into that.
yeah, yeah. It's an interesting thing to add into the mix. I think. Yeah.
Well, it is because it only will help us as we look at other plants. Because right
Mm.
now we actually are using a very limited amount of plants for
Well,
medicine resources, and we have so many more that we haven't tapped into. But if we can create some systems of looking at them, I think it's going to help us have more availability to other resources.
you could be a little bit more predictive about
Sure.
relationships potentially. Yeah.
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 Yeah. Wonderful. Luke, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, as always.